This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman. And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Get charged up for action that'll shock your system.
Tell me that's not cool.
An unstoppable superhero and his crew embark on impossible missions and will bring mutated villains to justice.
When Static's in the house, bad guys better step off.
Pull the plug on crime with the adventures of Static Shock. Yeah!
Welcome, everybody, to episode 317 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me, my good friend and brother, Liam. Liam, we have turned the calendar page, and after an exciting and laborious June, where we covered Batman Beyond, that's a couple of seminal Batman Beyond episodes, including the introduction of the future Justice League Unlimited, and also more Zeta Project than we've ever covered in one single month or on one single episode before. We have turned the calendar page here, and we are headed back to the sunny skies of Dakota, and that means we have a month of Static Shock reviews as we revisit the city of Dakota once again.
That's right, and this is an interesting episode that we have on the dock today because it is quite, for all intents and purposes, is a season 3 episode, which is, as we know, is when the sort of the visual revamp of the show was done, and along with the introduction of Richie becoming his own superhero identity as Gear. But this one was actually produced during season 2. And for whatever reason, just didn't end up getting released until much later down the line. And so we're back in the old art style, the early season 2, not even before, because I think they kind of start tweaking some things halfway through season 2. So this is like first half of season 2, early or late season 1 style Static, but it's technically a season 3 episode, that being Consequences.
That's right. Yeah, we have, so we are shifting backwards just a little bit, although, as you mentioned, an episode we had not yet to cover. So excited to chat about this one with you today. And before we do, we will, of course, get the official IMDb synopsis for this week's episode, which is brought to you by the Pod Tower. Head over to youtube.com/the Pod Tower today and subscribe. And not only will you get our entire episode catalog in one convenient YouTube streaming place for yourself, but you also will get access to a pair of other ongoing podcasts, which include the Watchtower Database's Jump on the Bat-Wagon, as well as their Intergang Interview podcast. There's also the entire catalog of the Tim Talk podcast, which covered every episode of the DCAU, as well as a bunch of other bonus episodes, all in one convenient streaming service for the low price of $0.00. That's right. Head over to today and subscribe at youtube.com/the Pod Tower.
That's right. So this is the synopsis for Consequences, which is written by Christopher Simmons, directed by Dennis Cowan, with music by Richard Wolf, and animation by Tama Production, with assistance by Hong Ying Universe. And that synopsis reads as such. Static's ego blows out of control and puts his friend's life in jeopardy. As his guilt grows, he seeks revenge, but is stopped by an unlikely ally. With a cool head and help, Static manages to make things right.
I think you give away the ending a little bit too much, which I feel like the perfect synopsis is like the balance, like we always say, it's like, this would be a great TV guide blurb, like just a brief little, you're not giving too much away, you're not getting in the weeds. This one's a little bit too much there. I think if you leave that last sentence out, you might have yourself like a C+, maybe a B-, but a little bit too rambly. So I'd say see me after class IMDb synopsis. So this episode, by the way, originally aired here in the States on the Kids WB programming block on April the 5th, 2003, meaning we just passed the 21-year anniversary of this episode's debut here. And so, Liam, kicking things off, we have a exciting Static flying throughout the city, and this is going to set the tone essentially for what we're going to be dealing with, as the synopsis alluded to, and that is Static is he's getting a little too big for his own britches. He's kind of full of himself. He's flying about the sunny skies of Dakota, doing handstands on his static. What's the name of that thing? The static disc. It's not
Static saucer.
saucer. That's right. Doing handstands on the static saucer as he's patrolling. He's showing off, waving to all of his fans. He basically just wouldn't be surprised if he was kissing babies too. Like, he's just enjoying all of the accolades of being Static. And in the meantime, he literally runs into Rubber Band Man.
Static, you all right?
Rubber Band Man? Watch where you're going.
I was. Can't say the same for you, Mr. Handstand Man.
I was in complete control up there, Sir Stretch-A-Lot. By the way, I'm patrolling this part of town.
Patrolling or showing off?
Hey, I patrol my way, you...
We'll finish this later.
Hey, this is my jurisdiction.
An argument then ensues between the two of them, as right away, Rubber Band Man accuses Static of being, a little bit of a show-off, and that lately he's been too arrogant to notice that he's showing off. However, this argument is short-lived, as it is interrupted by an alarm going off. By the way, right before the alarm goes off, Static begins telling Rubber Band Man that he's on the wrong side of town, and this is his patrol area, and Rubber Band Man disagrees. It's his patrol area, and they're fighting about it. Rubber Band Man, of course, now reformed and fully on the good side of things, as we've learned from our past reviews. But they both set off to a toy store where the break-in is going on. Well, it's not a break-in. I guess it's during the middle of the day. So the alarm's going off. And who do we run into but Shiv, our old giggly, annoying friend, who is there holding up a toy store. And I never felt more connected to Shiv when he exclaimed, "My two favorite things, play toys and money."
My two favorite things, play toys and real money. Hold up, Junior. Steal your own.
A little shopping between jail terms, Shiv?
I'm just a sucker for a good sale.
It's the Ninja Bot 3000, the toy for geeks with big bangs.
Oh, you think you can take me? Hi-ya!
I gotta get one of these.
I really, really felt a kinship there with Shiv as he yelled that in the middle of the store. But the only difference between the two of us is I don't steal my toys, Shiv, you dastardly fiend. So Shiv is attempting to steal the toys. Static and Rubber Band Man are doing their best to work separately to foil him. Rubber Band Man is initially successful, but is quickly overtaken by Shiv. Static then employs his magic electricity powers to bring a giant toy to life. It's like a combination transformer and a Rock'em Sock'em robot, maybe, all like human size, that he uses to take Shiv down. And we see that Rubber Band Man is still upset that Static is kind of continuing to be a show off as they continue to bicker, even at the after they've taken down Shiv. We cut to this pool hall where we see Puff and Onyx, who we've previously seen in and around Dakota a few different times, but they're hanging out, and Onyx is not too happy about the news reports recapping Static's success in being able to stop the break-in or the robbery that Shiv was attempting. She decides at this point that she reminds us that Onyx and her have been attempting to be bounty hunters at this point, and they've had very little to no success in doing so, and she blames Static. So she says that she needs to bring Static out and kind of do away with him in order to best him for good. In the meantime, we cut to Virgil, who is at his house, and he's giving a speech to the entire Hawkins family about the greatness of Static.
In summation, not only has the presence of metahumans benefited Dakota in certain ways, it has actually increased tourism. In fact, if they were here, I'm sure the tourism board would join me in a rousing, "Go Big Bang, go Big Bang, go! Go Big Bang, go Big Bang, go!" That's the end. You can applaud now.
Wow.
That was, something.
That's what an A in public speaking sounds like.
Even better the second time.
You just gave long-winded a whole new meaning. Good job.
Admit it, Sharon. All those big words kind of threw you, didn't they?
His family all look at him very similarly to the villain roundtable in the Almost Got Him episode, where they all just kind of just blankly stare at him with their eyes cocked at the end of it as he does his go big man, go dance. It's at this point that I believe Richie is also there, and he mentions that Static is off, or that Virgil is been a bit arrogant as of late, and sees that his attitude is beginning to change. Virgil, of course, does not buy this and says he's just reveling in the success of being Static, and he's feeling confident. It's at this point that he picks up the phone, calls Daisy, and invites her out to the movies. He's a bit curt with her. He's a bit short, kind of keeps interrupting her, talking over her. She had other ideas and other plans, but he just sort of bulldozes right over her and says, "We're going to the movies. We're going to see the new Adam Sandler movie, and that's that." And Richie also calls him out for not allowing them to kind of keep the plans they already had, which was go to an air and space display of some kind. And Virgil, again, just continues to act arrogant and bullies Richie a little bit. Richie makes some remark about how his ego may not fit in the seat next to him at the movie theater. So it's at this point that the movie theater, unfortunately, as Virgil and Daisy get there, Static decides to leave Daisy for a moment to use the restroom. It's at that point that Puff and Onyx coincidentally attack the theater, and it's at this point in the melee. Static does hear the commotion, is able to change into his static gear and come out and attempt to fight both Onyx and Puff together. Puff has this new sort of power that she's developed that allows her to spit acid, I guess. So she's been using that to try and rob the theater, and then is using it to try and attack Static as well. And in the melee, despite Static sort of getting the upper hand on Onyx, as he goes after Puff, she shoots out some debris that's standing over top of where Daisy is standing. She shoots him at Static, who's sort of hot dogging, and then it bounces off of his electro field and then ricochets into the doorway that where Daisy is standing, causing debris to fall in front of her, and then she walks forward and trips over top of it. We'll talk more about that in visuals. But through this, she is knocked unconscious, and Static has immediate guilt over his potential hot dogging that caused this one of his best friends, and certainly his love interest, to potentially get hurt in the melee. And that's where we head to the hospital, where we see that Daisy, unfortunately, is unconscious with no signs of when she may be coming out of her coma. And Static is quite disturbed about the fact that he has let one of his friends get hurt.
Dr. Bender?
Every head trauma case is different, Mr. Watkins. You can't predict it. She could wake up today, tomorrow.
What if she doesn't? What if she stays this way?
Let's get that thought out of our minds. Our Daisy is going to wake up. She will. She has to.
Mrs. Watkins?
Virgil.
They told me I could come in, but...
It's okay. Daisy could use every friend she has right now.
I was in the restroom when it happened. I'm sorry.
This wasn't your fault, Virgil.
Yeah, that's right. So, we see Virgil trying to sort of being comforted by Daisy's parents, who of course tell him there's no way he could have prevented it. Of course, we know a little bit better. And we cut to the junkyard. I guess this is like the I don't know. They already have the gas station certainly by this point. This is their alternate hangout.
I would say this is just the place where he goes to train usually, I feel like.
Yes, for sure. So he is, and he's just wrecking stuff. He's just taking out his frustration. And Richie comes to the junkyard after hearing and seeing all of the damage Virgil's causing with his powers in the junkyard. Tries to get him to calm down, but Virgil just won't listen. He's so frustrated, and he knows it's his fault. That attitude is not made too much better by when he is at dinner a little bit later with Sharon and Adam out of costume, who's still I'm kind of surprised they kept that through line, but yes, he's still Sharon's boyfriend. And he is very critical of Static, of course, not knowing that Virgil is Static at this point. And obviously that's not helping Virgil either, as it is Pop's girlfriend makes her return to drop some exposition on us that they have a lead on where Puff and Onyx have been hanging out at this pool hall, the one we saw earlier. And so Static goes and puts on his best Batman voice and tries to shake everyone down. And is really kind of wrecking shop there, still kind of spinning out of control. And Rubber Bandman once again shows up, and they actually have sort of a physical altercation as he is trying to get Static to calm down and listen, and listen to reason. We see Dante, the same informant from earlier, is able to get away in the melee and runs to where Puff and Onyx are hiding out. They're like in a sewer, I guess. I don't know where this is, but they're hanging out somewhere, and Dante finds them and tells them that Static's out of control and angry and has been looking for them. And rather than laying low, Puff decides that she's going to settle this once and for all, and have Static chase her out in the city, and she's going to try to lure Static out to have one final confrontation here. We get one little brief break here before our big action finale as Virgil goes back to the holiday, and he kind of opens up a little bit to the unconscious Daisy, that he realizes that he's just he wants her and a lot of other people in his life to appreciate him for being Static, and that wants them to know so that they know more about him and what his life is, and probably also would explain all of these absences he's constantly having to take. And so he was just getting a little bit careless, a little bit too full of himself, and now he's kind of let her down, and so he's vowing to make it right.
Don't know if you can hear me. I hope you can. I'm so sorry, Daisy. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I act the way I do sometimes. I guess I want to tell people I'm Static so badly. Especially you. I want to scream it from the rooftops. So when Puff and Onyx showed up, all I wanted was to impress you. Right then, nothing else mattered. Not even your safety. Please wake up, Daisy. Please forgive me.
I'm sure she does, bro.
Rich,
It's all right, man. We're cool.
Yeah, so that's when Richie shows up, and as you mentioned, when Static was where Virgil was doing his training in the junkyard, he kind of walked off without talking to Richie. Richie is able to finally catch up with him, and is able to sort of talk some sense into Virgil to allow him to give himself a little bit of grace. tell him to learn to be better and kind of move on, and that he still has a job to do. So at that point, we cut to downtown because Onyx and Puff are going to put into their plan to draw Static out of hiding. Virgil and Richie are walking around downtown, and it's at this point that they do, in fact, see Onyx and Puff. They are wreaking havoc. She's really just doing terrible destruction to the city. She just doesn't care. She's like throwing her acid spit on creating potholes. She's throwing it through windshields. She's making people crash into fire hydrants. She's cutting down stoplights. She's just being a menace. So as they sort of begin the fisticuffs, Onyx and Puff run off, and Static chases them inside a building. It's at this point that we realize, in the words of the Admiral Akbar himself, it's a trap, and they've lured Stack into an abandoned building to bring it down on top of him in order to kill him. Onyx is able to pull the entire frame of the building down one by one as the entire building does indeed collapse over Static. It appears the villains have had their success, but shortly thereafter, the rubble begins to shift and move, and coming out of it is a giant ball of metal pipes. And those metal pipes rise using electricity, and we know what's coming next as the pipes all burst in and around him. Static says it's the finest shield he could make up of, as he apparently has shielded himself with all of the pipes from the building. It's at this point that Puff and Onyx realize that, they better hightail it out of there as they run far, far, far away. And at that point, Static takes care of protecting the rest of the innocent bystanders as Onyx and Puff begin to attempt to attack them on the way out. We see that Static has learned his lesson here as he advises the Rubber Band Man, who has recently arrived, to go after Onyx and Puff. He's not in it for the glory anymore, folks. He's just making sure that people are safe. Rubber Band Man is able to track them down and do away with Onyx. However, Puff is able to overtake him very shortly, and it looks like things are not so good for our Rubber Band Man, but then shortly thereafter, Static does arrive, saving Rubber Band Man at the last second and taking care of Puff by causing her to hit a metal pipe that shoots some water into her face and apparently knocks her out. So we do get a little bit of a postscript as Rubber Band Man and Static share the headline and the glory for stopping Puff and Onyx in the latest news report. And then as Virgil is sitting in the kitchen reading the headline with Richie, the phone rings, and what do you know? They get the news that Daisy has awakened at the hospital. We cut to the hospital where Daisy is sitting with her parents, and she's got a room full of flowers. They mentioned that one of the sets of flowers was sent over by the Hawkins family themselves, and then as Daisy's dad opens up the curtains in the hospital window, he calls her over to the window to see a special flower that has been sent to her, and standing outside, floating on his static saucer with it, a flower made out of electricity, a daisy, I would assume, is none other than Static. And they stand there and look at each other, gazing into each other's eyes back and forth for several very, very, very long seconds as we fade to black. But that's the long and short of this episode, Liam. I think looking at the episode as a whole, it's somewhat formulaic to what we're used to, right? It's something happens to our hero, causes him to maybe doubt himself, or in this case, he trusted his own powers, a little bit too much, which causes him to have a setback, which then he has to then rebound from in the third and final act, and he's able to overcome the villain. So in some ways, it's pretty formulaic. I do like this, though. I like the idea that Static has been doing this for some time, and Virgil is getting confident in his powers. We said that production-wise, this would have taken place before the Batman crossover episode. But in theory, because of where this debuted, it would have been perhaps chronologically after he spent time hanging out with Batman. So we have he's kind of made it. He's in the big time now, and sharing the spotlight with somebody else, that being Rubber Band Man does seem like it's kind of beneath him. Like he doesn't need Rubber Band Man. He's kind of done a lot already to stop a lot of big bad guys all by himself.
Sure.
But I do like the fact that we have a classic superhero trope in where the hero's love interest slash friend in this case is injured by his own hubris, and then he blames himself for it and spends the rest of the time kind of losing his mojo, and he has to figure out how to recover from that and gain his confidence back and get it back to a normal level, not the type of confidence that got him into the trouble that he's in. So I do like that portion of the story, and I think the episode at least tracks and is kind of easy to follow that arc from where we start at the beginning with him being a hot shot and hot dogging it and not wanting Rubber Band Man's help to that final scene where he's like, Rubber Band Man, you go after the bad guys. I'll make sure that the citizens of Dakota are safe.
Yeah, I think he learned a little bit of a lesson. Like you said, this is pre-gear, so he's not used to working in tandem yet. There's a little bit, I think, too much of like he's being such a dingus for the first like 5 minutes of this episode. Like he's so, for lack of a better term, cartoonishly unaware of like what a jerk he's being to everyone.
Yeah.
And how everyone around him. And it's funny because Daisy is kind of the one that's dressing him down, which I guess is kind of the point, is that she's the one that's kind of starting to break through to him that he's being, out of character and he's being a jerk. But it's just like he's so outlandishly over the top jerk for the first 5 minutes of this, and then he gets angry. I think there's something here. I just think it's like you have to have him act a little bit like he's always cocky and quippy, but he just like you had to have him act like extra like weirdly aggressive with Rubber Band Man and with some of the other, with Richie and all of this stuff to kind of make the story work.
Didn't we just see that similarly in the Romeo in the Mix story also? Was it him that was like acting like a big shot? And I do feel like this is something that we come back to as a character trope.
And hey, he is supposed to be a teenager, and teenagers are mood swings are a part of the gig when you're that age. So I guess it's not impossible that he would feel so over the top, but it just felt like you're set, and you understand why as the episode goes on, because you're setting him up for this big fall, and sort of the guilt and anger that he feels as a result, and ultimately it's when he starts listening to his friends Rubber Band Man and Richie, and that he ultimately makes the successful move, teams up with Adam to save the day, and doesn't have to try to do everything by himself. So I think it's good. I just think it's like, to set up this sort of fall from grace he has, you had to have him act so over the top and like such a for so much of the first like 5 or 6 minutes of it. So like I said, it creates an interesting episode. There's not a lot of episodes where it feels like any of the characters are on static, are in like mortal danger.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not that type of show. It's not a problem necessarily, but so the fact that like Daisy is injured in action is kind of interesting. So I ended up settling on a 6 out of 10 for my plot. I think it's an interesting idea, but the road to get there is maybe a little clunky along the way. And then we'll talk about it more in visuals. I think I like Puff and Onyx as a duo with like very differing powers, and they're kind of a unique foil for Static, but they are just it feels kind of like it could have been any two villains in this episode. Didn't really need to be them. So
sure. Yeah.
It's a good solid episode, but like I said, it just feels like we had to really step outside of how we would normally characterize Virgil to make this episode work.
Yeah, and I think if you had some sort of chemical explanation, like maybe there was something, like you said,
like if one of Puff's powers was like it also made you insane or
right, or
aggressive, or
it heightened your douchebagginess, like
right,
something like that. Like, and she was
Tobey Maguire black suit. It just makes you
precisely. It
makes you strut a little bit.
Right, exactly. Then I think you have something even further there. But yeah, I'm with you. I went with a 5 out of 10 for my score. I think it's okay. It's there are things that I liked about it. I did like that it's easy to see that, like, okay, this is the moral, what they're going for. The hero did learn his lesson at the end, even though we again just said it's that same sort of plot point is used again further down the line. So at least in this case, we see that, if you aren't careful, your hubris could lead to your best friend tripping over a piece of rock and going unconscious. So, yeah, that's why I went with a 5 out of 10.
Hey, that's how they killed Nightwing in the Injustice books. So, tripping over a rock is very dangerous.
Please. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be animation and visuals. And it looks like Tama Production Co. is credited with the animation for this. As we mentioned at the top, we are reverting back to more of our season 2 look for this. Less cell shading, smaller budget, less traditional DCAU looking characters. The models kind of go backwards a little bit here. So with that in mind, I do give them a little bit of grace here for what they were looking, what the end result ended up being. But I will start things off by saying I understand that this show, as was the case with the other DCAU shows, this show even more so probably because of the standards and practices surrounding it. But the trip that Daisy takes over the rock is pitiful. Like, I literally went, oh, come on. They're not gonna put her in a coma. And they literally fade in the next scene and she's wearing like an oxygen mask and has the world's biggest bandage around her head.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, she didn't, like, if a rock had fallen on her, like, even if you don't see it, like, you just see the rock drop, cut to Static's eyes like getting big, and then you cut back and she's like laying there with like a piece of the ceiling on her. Like, okay, that would have been much more effective. But the rock falling, hitting the ground, her taking 2 steps, and then tripping over it and landing on her shoulder, and then that's what causes her head injury that takes her out for the second half of the episode. I laughed. I was like, this is not good. So again, I think maybe giving some grace in that they may not have been able to show what they wanted to show in that. But this is no Gwen Stacy neck snapping incident, or even like I don't know, that I can't even compare it to anything else. It was pretty sad.
Yeah, there's something this particular animation studio only did a couple of other episodes, including Pop's Girlfriend and Attack of the Living Brain Puppets, which I think we've talked about both of those prior. And Jimmy, they did that one. And I think every time, the thing that gets me is there's always something weird about the character designs. Like, they're just a little bit off model, a little bit too like Disney-fied. Like, everyone's got like big really like big pupils. And then the biggest thing, and I don't know, this wouldn't necessarily be on the animation, I guess this would be on like the coloration team or whatever. Onyx's eyes are backwards the whole episode.
Yes.
Like, I think every other episode there might be, I found like one other shot that looked from a later season where this happened again, but he's supposed to have like the yellow pupils, and the behind that is black, and then in this episode he has black pupils and just yellow eyes, like Clayface. Like,
right, it throws off his look. It certainly makes him less intimidating looking than what we're like. He's this big purple guy with like, He's supposed to look scary and intimidating. So when you weirdly, when you reverse that, it just makes him look a little more goofy, I feel like.
I feel like they played kind of fast and loose with his size a little bit too. Like his arms and legs are weirdly lanky. And I'd have to go back and look at some of his other appearances. Maybe that is consistent with this, but it's just like he looks so weird in this episode to me. So there's some things I like. There's the bit where Virgil goes to the pool hall and is kind of wrecking shop as Static is kind of a fun sequence. Also, you get that bit where him and Rubber Band Man kind of come to blows, and Rubber Band Man's doing all these different shape changes and things. I think that's pretty fun, but yeah, there's just something kind of generally off about the vibes of this episode, even beyond, I feel like, our normal Static season 1 and 2 look. There is something off about this. Like you can tell the difference between this and a Coco show or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's not great. I feel like the action that they used, this new power that Puff has, like every time she uses it, it looks like something out of the Super Friends from like 80s Hanna-Barbera animation. Like they zoom in real close to her face, and it's like her eyes close and it's this real exaggerated like Haktua, lack of a better term. But it's just not good. I was like, that's kind of rough. So yeah, not the best animation or animation studio used here. I guess I'll talk about a couple things that I didn't dislike. I like the idea of the setting of the toy store for the opening robbery. Thought that was kind of cool, even though we talked about Static's powers being magic for whatever they need to use, and him bringing a toy to life. But him bringing the robot toy to life to fight Shiv, I thought was pretty neat.
Yeah, that's actually pretty neat. I think that's there's a note on the DCAU wiki that in that toy store there was supposed to be an Icon figure, one of the other Milestone superheroes, kind of the closest thing Milestone had to a Superman type character. But I think that was ixnayed at the last minute. Those Milestone rights and DC, how DC and Warner Brothers, what they are and aren't allowed to do seems to change by the year. So great. I guess at the time maybe they only had a deal to use Static specifically, and so anything outside of that didn't work for that. But yeah, that sequence overall is kind of fun. Shiv also kind of, I feel like he's doing things he's never done before. Like he has like an extendo fist. Like before it's been he can turn into weapons, but now he can just make like a long fist as well. So it feels like we played a little fast and loose with what he can do as well. But you have a character like him and a character like Rubber Band Man, shape shifting against each other. That's kind of a fun sequence. And then yeah, as you mentioned, Static bringing the Rock'em Sock'em robot to life is kind of a fun bit. I also like the bit right at the start where Static is showboating. He's doing a handstand on his Static saucer, as mentioned, and he and Rubber Band Man collide. The saucer goes flying. Static goes, and another one of Static's powers that he apparently has is he could just make like a rope out of his electricity, and he just like attaches. He just like shoots a bolt out of his hand and attaches it to a water tower or something nearby, and I guess he rides like the electromagnetic force or pulse to safety there. Like I thought Rubber Band Man was going to have to reach out and catch him, but he doesn't. He just like Spidey's himself to the building using his ever expanding grab bag of powers.
Sure. Whatever the scene calls for, his powers are magic, and he can use it to do that. Moving on, things that I also didn't dislike. I think that the fight sequence, although the animation maybe lets it down a little bit, having a fight at a movie theater was pretty fun. I like the idea that Onyx is using like a popcorn bucket to drain the cash register, and then the fight that Static picks up the popcorn machine and smashes it over his head, which I was like, wow, that was pretty violent for something that wasn't allowed to show a lot of violence. He like drops a glass popcorn machine on this guy's head. I did think it was pretty ingenious also that he uses a ceiling fan to defeat Puff in that first little fight that
Yeah.
they have there. I thought that was pretty fun. I was like, oh, that's kind of unique. Rubber Band Man gets to kind of flex and show off his unique powers throughout here. We get him when he and Static bump heads initially. I think he uses his hand to turn into a broom, and then later he turns into like a tennis racket, which I thought was pretty cool.
Mhm.
And then even in his final fight against Puff and Onyx, where he kind of gets, it reminded me very much of any of those quote unquote stretchy guys. Whenever they get defeated for whatever reason, you see them all like stretched out. Like they haven't,
Yes.
the elastic doesn't snap back and they're just kind of
Mhm.
stretched out all over the place, which I kind of liked. That happens when he gets hit in the tree by Puff. So yeah, I liked that. I also thought it was a pretty unique sequence that we get to see Static kind of play Batman a little bit, where he goes into the pool hall and starts threatening to knock guys around.
Yeah, that's a pretty fun sequence. They even kind of have his eyes start glowing, which is not something they really pull out too often. Which I thought was really kind of fun, angry Static look. Because it's not a character that generally is trying to intimidate bad guys all too often. So it was kind of a fun sequence to see him, put on his best Batman impression and some of the ways they visualize that, I thought was a lot of fun. It's technically reused animation, the suit up sequence, but at the end when he and Richie are walking through the city, and they see Puff just kind of wreaking havoc, you see him run into the alley, and then the Static transition comes on screen, and then he flies out of the alley towards her. I thought is a pretty fun, well timed sequence.
Yeah, I agree. So, breaking everything down, even kind of grading on a curve, because giving it a little bit of grace, this is still going back to season 2 animation style and studios. I thought there's enough here to kind of save things. I ended up giving maybe solely on the interrogation scene and some of the Rubber Band Man stuff. Toy scene too, I guess. But 6 out of 10 was my final score for animation visuals.
Yeah, I gave it the same score. Yeah, I think there's good in here. It's not a disaster, but it's just the overall off-modelness of all of our main characters here, and especially those eyes on Onyx really bothered me. I don't know why, but that like totally destroys that design. Like I think that design is so great, and then when he has the eyes reversed, he looks so dumb to me. Like I let that ruin the whole episode for me somehow. But no, I just think the general sort of slightly off-modelness of the characters brought it down a little bit. But yes, they did make up for it in the action, which, we've had directors on the show before who often will say that some studios, you give them more action to do because that's what they're good at, or you give them more, sort of close-up expressions because that's what they're good at. So in this case, our director, Mr. Cowan, did a pretty good job of I think giving them what they did well.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. And I believe we have 2 people credited. We have Richard Wolf and is it Derek Thornton also credited?
Yeah, I think Derek Thornton might be the rapper on the intro song, because Richard Wolf is always credited as the actual music for the episode. But
Gotcha. There we go. Thoughts on music? Anything? We'll save the main event of me recapping our song of the episode here in just a second. But let's roll, let's rock, let's roll. That's the first thing that we hear is the or whatever that song is that they play. I thought, I was hoping we would get a Carmandillo appearance with that song showing up, but it wasn't.
That would have been good.
That would have saved the episode.
Absolutely, would have brought every category up a point or two. But yeah, I adore the music in the interrogation at the pool hall. lovely.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you recap the lyrics a little bit later. I really enjoyed that. As mentioned, that sequence, that suit up sequence he has at the end, where he sees Puff and runs into the alley, and they hit the main season 2 static theme, I think is really cool. I really think the again, they don't necessarily play the whole theme all the time, but when they use it well. So I liked that inclusion there. And there is some kind of like mopey, it almost feels kind of like sitcom-y music coming out of that first break when you fade back in on the hospital, and you see how sort of everybody's sad. You see Daisy's parents and everything. They kind of play this real sort of sappy sad moment on the sitcom music that I kind of liked as well.
Yeah. The two notes that I had beyond our main event here would be when the burgerful billboard starts falling down. There's like a real unique piece that plays. It's instrumental, but I was like, man, this would have been like, I would have loved to have heard this piece like play earlier in the episode, like multiple times, like make this the episode's theme song. But alas, it just punctuated that one scene. But then the kind of send off that we have at the end, which is sort of it's an R&B. I don't know what artist you would want to compare it to, but as Static is sharing his electric flower with Daisy through the hospital window, there's a very like mid-90s R&B song that plays to accompany them like sharing this heart-to-heart lovey moment. Talks about like not making me wait any longer and stuff like that. It was very, very like, all right, we know what they're going for with this song. It's a love sequence, and we're playing a classic R&B jam. But as you mentioned, the main event is really the song that plays during the interrogation, which is the lyrics are, want to play rough? Let's play. Want to hang tough? Okay. And it just keeps repeating over and over and over and over again. And then they chop it up, and it's like, want to play? Want to play rough? Want to play? Want to hang tough? Okay.
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved it so much.
As listeners will know, I've come to appreciate the absurdity sometimes of the lyrics, and that they add a special bit of characterization to the show that somehow make it endearing. Just the musical pieces themselves would never win any awards, but I kind of laugh along with them now at the ridiculousness of them. So for all those reasons, I ended up giving music a 6 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went just 1 point higher, maybe not surprisingly, 7 out of 10. The "Want to Play Rough" song is definitely the true highlight of the episode for me. But there's I don't know, it just fits that sequence because it's so over the top and ridiculous. So I always appreciate that with the static music.
There we go. All right, Liam, let's wrap things up here with our final category of the day, which is going to be our voice actors and actresses for our voice cast. Pretty big cast this week to talk about, but of course, most of the heavy lifting is done by our main stars. So without further ado, let's go ahead and cover today's voice actors and actresses.
That's right. So briefly, we have Brian Tochi returning as Shiv once again. We do briefly have Cheryl Lee Ralph back as Trina, Virgil's cop stepmom, not stepmom, Pop's girlfriend.
Dad's girlfriend.
Pop's girlfriend, as the episode is entitled. We have Sean Patrick Thomas as Dante, the informant who's running around telling Puff and Onyx what's going on throughout the episode. We do briefly hear Maria Canals-Pereira as Shelley Sandoval, the news reporter, riling everyone up by telling them what a great job Static did, and
getting cut off by Puff as she hurls her acid breath.
That is a great bit, by the way, because she blows up the screen and everyone goes, "What the heck?" And they look over and they see Puff and like, "Oh, it was her."
Right?
And they all just turn back to the pool tables. Like, it's a really funny little bit there. I'm not quite sure who to credit on the voice acting side because it's kind of like a jumble of voices there. But I thought that was a fun bit as well. If we didn't mention that, but
sure.
We do have Michelle Morgan as Sharon briefly, And then kind of some of our bigger names, we do have Kimberly Brooks returning as Puff and playing a dual role. We have Kevin Michael Richardson as both Robert Hawkins, of course, and as Onyx. Like I said, I really like Puff and Onyx as this wacky little duo. Like, there's not really anything that seemingly ties them together as characters. Like, he's a big, like, kind of Hulk guy, and she's a ghost, an acid ghost. Like, there's nothing really that like ties them together thematically. But I think they're a lot of fun together as this kind of, and even have like little bits of like back and forth where she's like, oh, they're making us look like criminals. They're treating us like criminals. He's like, but we are criminals. like it's very like he's very matter of fact about what they're doing, and she's still kind of like dressing it up like they're kind of being hard done by the by Static not letting them be bounty hunters or whatever happened in their previous episode. So I think they have a lot of fun back and forth together.
No, absolutely they do. Yeah, I think I don't remember. It's been so long since we covered the last episode with them on it, but I think most of their work. I mean, Kevin Michael Richardson is a voice acting legend, so I feel like anybody that he works with, he's going to bring them up. Their interactions, I think, are Miss Brooks's perhaps best work of the episode. When she's kind of left to do the carrying by herself, I think it's maybe not as strong. But of course, as I said, I think if you put anybody behind Babe Ruth in a batting, in the batting order, they're going to immediately do better, to use a sports metaphor. So of course, putting somebody with somebody who's been doing this for decades and is still at it today, it makes sense that the rising tide is going to lift all boats, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a good cause to think that way. And also, it should be worth mentioning, though we haven't covered that yet, they end up playing father and daughter in the Mystery of the Batwoman film.
There you go.
That's the last time they would work together on a DCAU project here. But then we have, of course, we do have Kadeem Hardison returning as Rubber Band Man / Adam Evans. He gets a little bit more to do, I feel like. I mean, he was the villain a couple of times, and then we've seen him sort of, we saw him in this last adventure sort of struggling with I forget what Coolio's character was named, Replicon.
Yes.
And of course also the episode where we found out that he and Ebon were brothers that we covered. So like we've seen him kind of grow. So I like that Rubber Band Man is just kind of out and about doing his own thing. We don't have to see him every episode, but it's fun when he shows up here. And in this episode, he does actually get Mr. Hardison gets a little bit more to do, because he has to kind of be the guy, as our synopsis called it, the unlikely ally who, even though he and Static are butting heads through a lot of the episode, he's kind of also the one that gets through to Static a little bit about how, about not only about how this is kind of his fault, but also that he's going about fixing it the wrong way by trying to go in sort of guns blazing. So he's got a lot more heavy lifting to do than his usual episodes.
Yeah, he gets to play off of Michelle Morgan's Sharon a little bit. They have a little bit of back and forth also, and yeah, I think seeing him get a little bit more on the heroic side also of things, I like seeing that, and having him bounce off of Phil Lamar and honestly the rest of the Hawkins family. It was good. It was good to hear him back, and I think he did an adequate job.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we have our two leads. Actually, three. We have Crystal Scales as Daisy, briefly. Like I said, I do like the bit that even before she gets hurt, which is kind of the whole motivation for Virgil's mood swings in this episode, she's already like not taking it in a way that like he kind of gives it to Richie, and Richie's kind of passive aggressive about it, but he's not really listening. But she's just like dressing him down immediately for not listening to her and for cutting her off and interrupting her. And like, I think she does well with her very limited time. And then of course we have Jason Marsden as Richie and Phil Lamar as Static. Mr. Marsden gets a little bit more to do because he gets to kind of have those couple of arguments with Virgil, and then they kind of have their makeup moment at the hospital towards the end. So a little bit more to do for him as still in the supporting pre-gear Richie.
Yeah, I think they're heart to heart there, and his kind of His comments about Static's ego were kind of witty and funny, and then his job is to bring Static back to Earth once he's kind of headed towards this scary over the edge type of attitude of he's gotta make things right through by any means necessary because Daisy's hurt now. So him bringing Virgil back to his kind of normal or a bit of a more normal mindset is kind of what plays out. And I think it, as always, those two have great chemistry and it works out well.
Absolutely. And then, as mentioned, we have Phil Lamar as Static / Virgil. And yeah, he's got a lot to do in this episode. A lot of, he's not just the quippy, funny guy. As we said in this episode, he's kind of playing the very full of himself version that we see at the start of the episode. And then the sort of out of control, rageful Static. Like we said, that's not really an emotion we see on Virgil too often in this series. So even amongst the myriad of Phil Lamar voice performances as Virgil and Static that we get to watch and have watched already, I think this one does stand out a little bit just because he gets to be a little bit more varied in the emotions he's portraying that Virgil is going through.
No, I agree. From his arrogant hot-headedness at the beginning to him being sort of full of himself and confrontational and laughing off Rubber Band Man's critiques of his arrogance, to then, going through the idea that he's could lose one of his best friends and he's down and he's depressed. And we get sort of that depression discussion that he has with Daisy's parents. And then, he's just kind of down for the next little bit there. And then we kind of get that bedside confessional where he's holding the mask and talking about, the reason why he's excited is because deep down he wants people to know that he's Static so that they like him for him. And unfortunately his curse is, he can't share that secret with anybody. So, yeah. And then towards the end, again, just kind of getting his groove back a little bit towards the end and having learned his lesson and the excitement he hears when, Daisy is fully recovered. So yeah, it's quite the emotional roller coaster that he has to go on. And of course, being the voice acting legend that he is, Phil Lamar was more than capable of handling it and delivers an excellent performance in my opinion.
Absolutely. For all those reasons, I ended up giving voice acting a pretty strong 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I just went 1 point lower. I think if the supporting cast was a little bit stronger, I feel like I maybe would have given it an 8, maybe even a 9. But I feel like Mr. Lamar does the majority of the heavy lifting here, and it's his performance that really stands out. But still, pretty strong scores from both of us, regardless. All right, Liam, totaling things up here today. With my final score of the afternoon, I end up with a 24 out of 40. What about you?
Yeah, and I'm a few points higher this week at a 27 out of 40.
All right, so where do we land with as far as rewatchability with this episode? Doesn't feel like in the grand scheme of things, we have a lot that's important to the Static story of although I guess the romance between Static and Daisy sort of solidifies here. We kind of always had them being flirtatious, and this obviously he's much more clear with his feelings by the end of the episode. It is, as we mentioned, a learning moment, TMCR, a very special learning moment for our hero, but at the same time, as we said earlier, he kind of learns this lesson again just a few episodes later on. So maybe it's not as important as I once thought. It does have the recurring villains that have rebounded here. I'm leaning towards this is a skip, though, in the grand scheme of things, just because it doesn't feel like it moves too much of the story forward or has any long-term effects.
Yeah, it's not one you have to watch. There's fun bits in it. Like you said, I like Phil Lamar getting to stretch his legs a little bit as this character, but as far as in overall importance to the show, not really anything on here that you need. It's not like Daisy has memory issues going forward in the series or something because of this. So,
and she apparently was unconscious enough to not know that Static can.
Well, yeah, I forgot to kind of mention that. I kind of thought that was going to be like a reveal, like
Right.
she did hear him or something, or like there was going to be some illusion that maybe she does know, or maybe she did hear him.
Right.
But they don't really give us that. Like Static comes and like gives her a get well soon present at the end, but there's never really a moment where it seems like she knows
Yeah.
or has picked up that he's Virgil. So that would have put a little bit a few more weights in the must watch category. But no, as it stands, it's a inoffensive little episode, but not one that you need to watch to appreciate this series.
Agreed. All right, Liam, that began to wrap things up for this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget, this is the part of the show where we talk about how you can support the podcast. The easiest way to do that would be to go ahead and follow us on your favorite social media app at DCAU Review, both on Twitter/X and, of course, on Instagram. Join the conversation, chat with us. People talk with us all week long about whatever it is that they like. DCAU news, Batman, Caped Crusader news, DC Comics stuff. It's a great time to be.
Wanted to shout out our buddy Scotty, who I think tweets and follows us on Instagram, for almost always being the one who responds first when like we ask a general question. Like this week he came with receipts for The Dark Knight Strikes Again, who if the Sons of Batman made it into that second volume, which I think you mentioned. We weren't sure about, and there was something else. Oh, he mentioned that we were talking about the Freeze origin in the Batman episode, and he mentioned that you do see a little like picture of Victor and a lady in like his car dashboard in the first episode.
Okay, there we go.
It's probably Nora. So just want to give a special shout out to Scotty because he listens to I think all of the episodes, even the Zeta ones, and also is almost always the first one to point it out. So he is always he's a great auxiliary research for
what a trooper.
Us. So
we love it.
Always appreciate Scotty on the show.
Absolutely, shout out to Scotty. And if you want to join Scotty in the ranks and getting shout outs, let us know. Any corrections that need to be done, anything that was left ambiguous, feel free to send us a message, tweet us, whatever they call tweets now, or send us a message on Instagram. We're also on Threads, which we check every now and then. So if you do tweet us on there or thread us on there, we will get it in a few weeks probably and kindly respond at that time. Of course, if you want to support the podcast, you can also check out the show notes where if you would like to become a monthly supporter, as we have, and join the folks that already support us monthly, you can check out the link in our show notes. You can also check out the link to our store if you want to pick yourself up a piece of merchandise to support the podcast. You can do so right there, or check out the show notes of whatever format you're listening to the pod. And of course, subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app if you're listening on a podcast app. A lot of followers on our Spotify. We know a lot of people listen on Apple Podcasts. If you listen on there, both of those formats, both of those platforms allow you to leave 5-star reviews. That helps us because when other people look for interesting podcasts, that helps them find us. It'll also, if you listen on Apple Podcasts and you leave a little review blurb, as is free to do through Apple Podcasts, if we see it and read it on the air and you live within the continental United States, we'll send you a little thank you gift just for leaving a little blurb. So feel free to do so. Even if you've left one before, we'll send you another thank you gift. So check that out. Liam, we will continue this week we will continue next week with yet another review of Static Shock as we check out another sunny sky of Dakota and another adventure with Static and the rest of the crew.
That is right, Cal. And as we mentioned, this episode, Consequences that we reviewed, aired as part of season 3, but was really produced to be part of the second season. And there was one more episode that suffered a similar fate here, that being the episode Trouble Squared, and that one will be coming up next week. So that's gonna wrap up our white shirt Static episodes, I think, unless there's another one that somehow falls into the fourth season. Then I'm pretty sure this will be our last white shirt static. So
something you don't want to miss. Static shirt. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. All right, sounds great. Can't wait to check out that one with you, Liam. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.